Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Louise Takawiwa, ko Aitken Foundation toku mahi, no paniki ahau, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm really honoured to be here, not only because it's already been a pretty extraordinary day. Unfortunately, I wasn't here yesterday, but very honoured to be part of this summit, and also really honoured to be up here with my friends, which is always a nice thing, to be surrounded by people that you not only admire but you really like. So what we're going to do today is, we were asked to talk about social enterprise, but we didn't want to just talk about social enterprise. So we really want to talk about the new economy and why is that required and what are we doing about it. So we've pulled you into a closer group because we want to have it be a little bit more interactive, and we've got a bit of an exercise to go through. So we're all pretty relaxed people, and so we're going to talk for a little bit each, and then open for questions, and then we'll just get stuck into a bit of an exercise and then just see where we get to. So my name's Louise Aitken. I'm the Chief Executive of the Aitken Foundation. I think we've kind of got some slides, I think. Let's have a look. Yeah. So Aitken is a name gifted to us by our extraordinary kaumātua up in Ngāti Porou. It means to encourage bold action, and that's really what we're trying to do as a small social enterprise which has got charitable status and a limited liability company and all of those really complicated things that I'll talk about in a minute. But we're really here to transform the economy by harnessing the power of impact. We really believe that our society is different than what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, and the economy is an important enabler to not only our environmental success, but also our social and cultural success. And we really think that if impact was at the heart of our economy, we'd be finding solutions a lot quicker than what we're doing at the moment. So we are at the foundation of what we do as Aitken is to support the growth of social enterprise. Some good work was done by our friends at Burl, and we believe that the social enterprise sector is around about 3,711 organisations, contributing over $1 billion to the economy. This isn't a bunch of small startups of young millennials trying to do good. These are established, successful businesses that have been in the economy for up to 70, 80 years and ride on the shoulders of those who have gone before us in Aotearoa. Māori enterprise, as Shay will talk about, is a fundamental model of what social enterprise has been for many generations, where the people and the land are at the core of that business, and the profit and the trading enables the benefit to be understood and shared. The one data point that's missing from this slide is probably 10, 100 times, maybe 1,000 times bigger than the 1 billion number. And that's the impact that social enterprise delivers. We don't know what that is, and we're working very, very hard on trying to figure out that. Because all too often, and particularly in the charitable space, we spend too much time focusing on the numbers of, for example, charities, what they contribute to the economy, and we fail to realise or even celebrate what's the most important number is what's the impact that they're delivering, what's the positive change that they've enabled to our society, to our communities, and to our land. And what we want to do is start talking about that number. Because if we do that, we change the influence that the 3,711 plus organisations like the ones who you'll hear about from today are actually doing in our economy. So that's what Aitken is all about. We do that in a number of different ways. Social enterprises and organisations who deliver impact need, in our view, three key things. They need capability support, not only on the impact side, but they also need support to be financially sustainable, to grow and scale. And that is often just what normal businesses need. There is a great conversation going on globally in the social enterprise sector that we need to stop talking about being business-like. We need to start talking about being business. And we need the same things that many businesses need. We need the support of advisors and professional services and people to help us understand how to be better at the financial side. And we also need help to understand and grow our impact and understand how to improve the impact that we're having on the societies in which we operate. The second thing that we need, like any other normal business, is access to capital. To scale and grow, you need some capital to help you along that way. And we were very proud last year to launch New Zealand's first impact investment fund. I spoke about it at an event last night to a bunch of institutional investors and said how hard it was to raise the capital. We raised just under 9 million from 36 investors, some who are here at this conference. And God, it was hard. The first thing we had to do was educate people what impact investing was before they opened up their wallets, even if they said, well, come back to us when you show it's successful. But we really had to be able to demonstrate to people that an investment in impact is actually something that we should be all doing. We should expect a financial return, of course, if that's what we're aiming for. But for every dollar that we invest, why shouldn't we receive a financial, social or environmental outcome? And how can we make that mainstream? So we've done 2 investments in our fund. I never thought in my life I would have anything to do with seaweed, but we've invested in a seaweed company, which is very cool, and I'm now having really odd conversations with CEOs of fishery companies about how we can align with what they want to do in the seaweed space. And we've also invested in a technology company that delivers health outcomes for people with severe health issues. So that's the second bit, so capability first and then investment. And really importantly, as a social enterprise, as an organisation that trades, you need a market in which to trade in. You can't just go up and knock on the door of the big guys and say, can you buy my thing because I deliver impact? We needed a concerted, focused program in order to do that. And last year we launched a program called Forward, and that is to facilitate the buying and selling of goods and services that deliver impact. We brought together 12 foundation buyers who, as you can see from the slide, have a purchasing power of 27 billion. That's quite a lot. And what we're really excited about is even the percentage that could go to deliver social and environmental impact. What we have to do on the other side of that is build the capability and readiness of those organisations to enter supply chains. And that's hard, because not only do you have to have a good and service that is as good, if not better, than what your competitors have, but you better be able to articulate your impact, because that's the stickability. Because organisations like the Fonterras, the ANZs, the SAPs, the Warehouse, all of these organisations who have entered our supply chain, they've said, we know it's good, but we need to know why it's good. We need to be able to consolidate and report this impact in order for us to continue to have social procurement within our supply chains. So that's pretty exciting for us. If you know anyone who has a significant supply chain, please tell them to contact me, because we want to get to 50 billion by the end of the year, one of my KPIs with my board. So we're hoping to increase that number by 10 billion next week with the signing on of another significant corporate. So anyone with $10 billion of procurement spend, I'll buy you a beer later on. The other thing that we're doing in order to be able to change this conversation around impact is being a bit bold, like our name means. And we thought, well, it's not just good enough having a partnership with government, you've got to leverage that partnership. So with the support of some extraordinary lawyers, one who's sitting just here, we commissioned a piece of research and we presented it just before Easter. We took the challenge from Minister Parker, who said, I understand that the charities structure isn't right for social enterprises. It's not the right model when you are a trading organisation. But I think the Companies Act and the company structure is fine. And he said in the letter, prove me wrong. So So we did. We did a deep dive with 20 social enterprises and understood what challenges they had based on the legal structure that they selected. Organisations like Aitken, we had to have both. We have a limited liability company and we have a charitable trust. And that's really expensive. We pay about $25,000 a year in auditing bills, let alone what it costs us in man hours and our accountancy bills. And as a small organisation, that's not sustainable. We've been helping organisations through some extraordinary pro bono support that we get, and sometimes it's $40,000 for them to set up the legal structure that's right for them. That's just not acceptable. It's just not possible for many organisations. So what we did is we not only proved what the problem was, and of course you're never going to let the opportunity pass you by without telling government what the solution is. So we've proposed a change to the Companies Act, whereby impact is recognised and it's a status for New Zealand businesses who can demonstrate that impact is at the core of what they do, that it's governed, and that you can damn well prove your impact. So we're hoping to go on a journey with the New Zealand government over the next couple of months, with the support of MB, the support of DIA, Treasury, IRD, the lot of them, with maybe the Treasury thrown in there as well, to understand how this is possible and why is it time to do that. And the most important thing that's happening in my view in New Zealand this year is the Living Standards Framework. This is the superpower for impact enterprises. This is the language in which we can use to demonstrate how, as trading businesses, we are delivering to what the society and the planet need. It's the language in which we can prove that to government. We're not going to government for a handout. We don't need grant funding. We need their market. We need them to provide access to the right forms of capital when that's appropriate. And we need them to be providing the capability support so that social enterprise and impact enterprises aren't just 3,711, they're 300,000. They're not contributing $1 billion to the economy, they're contributing 500 billion. So have a look on our website, talk to this extraordinary man, Stephen, who helped us with the research. If we enable this in our economy, we're demonstrating that this is the new way we should act as an economy. This whole dynamic between making money on one side of the coin and giving it on the other is no longer appropriate. It hasn't worked to the degree that it needs to. It's not enough anymore for government and philanthropy to think that they need to solve this alone. Business has a significant part of that, and in our mind, impact enterprises are the epitome of how you can use a market to do good. So what we're hoping for is a legacy of being bold, to enable organisation like Christina's and Shay's to thrive, so that we have choices about where we spend our money. We have choices where we invest our money, and we also have choices as to where we work. And if those three things come together, we will see a significant change in our economy, and we term it the human economy. So I'll leave it there and pass over to Shay or to Christina first, and then on to Shay. And then we've got a bit of an exercise after that to really think about what is at the heart of this, and it's always going to be impact. So tēnā koutou katoa, and I'll pass over to my friend Christina.
Kia ora, Louise. Kia ora koutou. Ko Devil te Maunga, ko Sawyers te Awa, ko Kanata te Roto, ko Christina Bellis tōku ingoa. I'm Christina Bellis, and I head up Thank You Payroll. Thank You Payroll, we are in the business of payroll and PAYE intermediary, which means that we file all of your payroll-related taxes to Inland Revenue. But first and foremost, we see ourselves as in the business of generosity. We are a software as a service company with our core work providing small to medium enterprises and registered charities with a beautifully designed payroll software, and we keep them all compliant by doing that filing to the government. But we use our business as a platform to create impact, increasing social and environmental wealth and well-being. We apply the commercial strategies of business, but with a triple bottom line approach: social, environmental, and financial, or people, planet, and profit. And we put that purpose and that profit side by side. So this is the why we do what we do. I'm just going to briefly run you through our history. We are one of the smaller businesses. We've been around for 10 years and growing pretty quickly. So our calculations showed quite early on that a government subsidy that was available for intermediaries was actually generous enough that we could provide that service for free to our clients, to the small and medium enterprises and the charitable trusts that actually met the threshold of that subsidy. And that would offer them the ability to grow their business, and it would save them time, it would save them money, and it would actually save them a lot of stress and complexity. And if any of you have ever run payroll, it's stressful and complex with the Holidays Act. We were also taking 25 cents of every $2 subsidy that we were getting from the government, and we were giving it to charity. From the environmental perspective, we calculate and offset our business emissions, we mitigate wherever possible, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve our procurement platform, buying products and services that we need in our business from ethical providers and other social and impact enterprises wherever possible. We also host an annual tree planting event, inviting our employees, families, our clients, and our partners to come out and join us. And we've always, on the financial side, we have shareholders, and that's partly to do with the capital that Louise was mentioning. And we've always had an investment strategy in which that we anticipate a profit that we can both return the profit into the business to help it grow, but also provide an ROI to those shareholders who've actually invested in our vision. Now, the road hasn't always been easy, as it generally isn't for a small business that many of you might know. We grew really slowly in the first 3 years. We were bootstrapping, and we didn't really have much money for marketing until Lonnie Evans came on board as the first CEO, and she really started seeding the vision and the value and the opportunity to key networks around the country, which for us were accountants and bookkeepers in that space of payroll who could get it out to their clients. We relied very heavily on word-of-mouth marketing, and that did us really well. And in 2014 to 17, our client base grew by about 800%. We were like ducks. We were, really smooth on that surface, going really quickly, and our feet pedaling like mad underneath to keep up. The inland revenue said that we were the fastest growing intermediary, and people would argue that that was because we were offering a free service compared to our competitors. But what they didn't quite understand was that that free was part of our philanthropic giving. That was how we chose to return that money to the businesses, to charities, to the environment. We also started the Thank You Charitable Trust, which is a unique grant giving, although I'm going to change that to gift giving organization, to help distribute those charitable donations. Now, Thank You Charitable Trust is a completely separate organization from us because in Aotearoa currently, as you just heard, we have for-profit and we have not-for-profit, and there is not a space in between to have both. We had to change our model a few times, as you do, because nobody actually trusted free as well. There was a lot of people who were like, there's got to be a catch. There's got to be a hidden cost. There's something that's not right there. And they didn't take the time to have a kōrero with us to understand that it was actually their money. It was your tax money that was helping to fund through this initiative. So what we did is we put in very, very nominal fast turnaround fees, which actually placed a value on the service. You could still do it for free if you used a 2-day turnaround, but you could do it faster by paying about 50 cents per employee that you wanted to pay. People saw a value. They were like, cool, they're legit. But that didn't quite meet what we were trying to do, so we said we're going to start a thing called regular giving, in which if you were a client, you could donate a certain amount to a charity every month, and we would waive all your fees, and you could do everything again for free, trying to foster the pay-it-forward model. So we were getting back to free, charities were winning, the client also got the feel-good aspect. So building an impact-focused business for us has meant that To date, we've saved not-for-profits an estimate, well, close to $1 million right now because of providing that service for free. Not-for-profits at the moment are about 15% of our client base, so that number is way higher for the amount of money that we've put back into businesses who use our service as well. We've given over $250,000 directly to community initiatives through the Thank You Charitable Trust. And we have planted over 1,000 trees in carbon sink initiatives and have another one coming up pretty soon. We are accredited carbon neutral. We are a living wage employer. And we've also lent our voices to the Climate Leaders Coalition. And I guarantee you we're probably the smallest business on that coalition alongside the likes of Air New Zealand and Zed Energy. But we think it's really important that our voices and all voices are represented because we all are working towards a tomorrow that's healthy and thriving. So we also have more than 8,000 clients and growing at the moment who are part of that impact. Every time they run payroll through our system, we actually make the impact go way wider in these ways than simply moving numbers around on a banking screen. And I was recently asked at an event how people could know what businesses were actually using Thank You Payroll because they wanted to support those businesses who were supporting us, which I thought was delightful. And it's not that all the businesses that use us are impact businesses or impact enterprises, but it's the fact that we're trying to create a network of support that goes much deeper and further than just purchasing a product or a service. So as we were growing, we had to iterate and change, which is a bit easier in a small startup, but being committed to distributing all that wealth, we didn't have a lot of disposable income at our fingertips, and our tech was slower to scale than our competitors, who were also getting that subsidy and charging for their clients. But Smart Business does careful projections and plannings for these scenarios, and we were progressing on a pretty perfect trajectory until the government suddenly announced changes to payroll legislation, which came in last month, that you might know, which threw a spanner in our plans. And we needed capital in order to meet those changes quickly because there was an opportunity that presented to us. Growth grants weren't really accessible because we weren't in a space of groundbreaking R&D or we didn't meet a threshold of revenue. And so after looking at all our options, we chose to do an equity crowdfunding campaign, which was another big and expensive and time-consuming endeavor to undertake. But we benefited from an investment readiness grant that was provided by the Aitken Foundation that helped us, and we started a really intense campaign which ended with almost $500,000 in capital and 167 new shareholders. Now, reporting back to our shareholders includes a heavy lean on the good impact stories right alongside the business growth, because it's that growth that allows us to do the impact and to tell our story and to tell our journey. And what we've got is those 8,000 clients and growing at our fingertips, and my goal is to help them and inspire them to make incremental changes towards reducing their own emissions or practicing better procurement policies or helping them to increase social wealth in their own businesses. So how does philanthropy fit into all of this? I know there are some constraints around where some community trusts can give their money. They can only do it for not-for-profits. All these things might change in the future. As Louise was saying, there are outdated legislation that we need to really scrutinize. But we threw around some ideas, and there are things like Kickstart the Crowdfunding Foundation campaign, if you're able to, but sharing those knowledge, those skills. And I'm repeating some stuff that you were saying there because it's really important. We are operating as businesses, but with the impact at our core. So doing secondments to those kinds of businesses that are growing, because ultimately they're going to distribute that wealth well further into the society and the economy. You could offer secondments for marketing, business support, budgeting or forecasting. You could share skills and knowledge, invest in building the capabilities of your teams. Mostly you could purchase their products and or their services or become a service provider. And of course, introducing them to networks and customers. So the future, as we're talking a lot about this conference, how you see the future, my future is a very generous future. And there are a growing number of businesses in that impact area and who are building towards the human economy. I'm pushing for a world where we're able to choose products and services that are aligned with our values. Thank You Payroll offers payroll and taxes, but we're in the business of generosity. And I would like to know why I can't, go to my dentist and have the same thing, or choose my next car from a dealership that does that kind of thing. Everything can actually go further. There is so much wealth to share around. And we just need to help all of those impact investment businesses scale up so that they can provide the benefit of the future human economy. So take the plunge. I will pass over to Shay, who is going to talk us the story about Te Whare Huka Huka.
Nā kia ora tātou. Just before I start, how's the echo sounding down the back there? Up here it's terrible. So how's the audio over there? Is it okay? Yeah? Okay, cool. So how many people are familiar with Te Whare Huka Huka, the organisation, have some background at least about it? Okay, so for a lot of us, we still are unfamiliar with it, so I'll give a bit of a background around the context of it. We've heard from Lou so far some of the journey that social enterprise has been on as a sector, some of the challenges and some of the work that's been done to ensure that there's the right structures kind of coming, and that as a sector it's kind of being prioritized, because we know right around the world it's gaining traction. It's a new way of doing better business that's actually focused on creating social value alongside financial value. And then Christina's given us a great example as well, and thank you Payroll, around how they have actually created a business that does just that. Te Whare Huka Huka is kind of an interesting example because we are ourselves a social enterprise, so we're a bit of a case study, but we're also an enabler of many other social enterprises, particularly Māori organisations. We've worked with about 105 around the country. They're usually collectively owned, they hold assets, and they have a social mandate, an environmental mandate, so they care primarily about creating good in their communities, but they want a way to sustain that, and they use their asset base to do that, or at least their intention is to use their asset base to do that. We kind of think of Te Whare Huka Huka jokingly like the Ice House meets Akina meets the Institute of Directors. So we kind of do a bit of governance stuff, a bit of business growth stuff, and a bit of social enterprise kind of work capability building as well. We came out of the Ice House, so we essentially were a unit in there to begin with, and so we were kind of getting a whole lot of resources wrapped around us and supported really well, it's like this concept called intrapreneurship, where you're actually doing entrepreneurial activity and setting up a new venture, but inside an existing organization, which actually is another way in which some of your organizations may be able to support social enterprises to spawn, and those social enterprises might even be the innovative edge that helps lead your organization into the future, given the pace at which disruption is happening. But I digress. So Te Whare Huka Huka came out of the Ice House. It was the Māori unit of that, and we realized actually to be true to our mission of enabling Māori organisations and our vision of improving the lives of 10 million Indigenous people, we really needed to have our own organisation that was run by Māori, that had a Māori-specific strategy, and that wasn't beholden to the broader strategy of the Ice House, because given that the strategies of big organisations might change quite a lot, and this being a fleet-footed kind of niche side unit, it may have become not a priority in the future. We didn't want that to happen, so we pulled it out of the Ice House and we've established it as its own social enterprise, and boy, what a journey that's been. So what I thought I'd do is start with this slide, because what this sets out is what we term our theory of change. Now, we came up with this thing we call a theory of change before we were aware that there's actually a thing called a theory of change. So this may not tick all the technical boxes of what's supposed to be in there, but for us it communicates the story of how what we do creates scalable change and enables the future that we want to see. So if I just walk us through the different boxes here, because I'm conscious that we may not be able to read all of it. The first box there is empowering leaders, the second is strengthening organisations, and the third is connecting the dots. So essentially, if we do these three things really well with Māori organisations, if we can build the capability, the confidence, and the focus of the Māori leaders, empower them, And then if we can strengthen their organizations in terms of like the systems and the processes and the strategies, and if we can connect the dots, if we can connect them with funders, partners, customers, potential investors, experts who have really important skill sets, if we can do those three things, then we believe that our organizations, our Māori organizations, are going to increase their impact. They're going to be far more resilient and strong. They're going to have good foundations in place, and their social impact's going to be able to be a lot higher because of that. So when they're, when they are stronger like that, when they're empowered, when they've got strong systems in place, and when they're well connected with the ecosystem, then they're going to be more successful, more sustainable, and more profitable, right? Which is a great story. That's kind of what the social enterprise dream is, to have organizations that have increased financial and social impact. If we do that at scale, moving around to the bottom box there, we get thriving communities. So we're actually seeing many different social enterprises all pumping out incredible social impact, doing that in all of our communities. That's going to start to lift a lot of or help solve and address a lot of the challenges inside our communities. We're going to see things like employment, increasing of employment. We're going to see better social and cultural outcomes, because a lot of the time that's what these Māori organizations are working on. And we're going to see a lot more of community pride as well, just knowing that their local organization, that they're a stakeholder in, is successful and therefore is a bit of a beacon of hope for them in their community. And then moving around to the last box there, when we do that at scale, in New Zealand and across the world, then we're going to set a new norm or a new status quo of what it means to be Indigenous and successful. Those two things can be considered in the same sentence in the mind of Indigenous people who might otherwise have been told a different narrative or might have a different narrative and reinforced to them every day. And so that's kind of what we're working on, building capability, strengthening organizations, connecting dots, because then we'll increase the impact of Māori organizations, which helps their communities to thrive. And when we have many Māori thriving communities, we're going to have a completely new norm for what it means to be Māori and successful. So this is kind of like our theory of change, right? Which is a story about how we do what we do. And I think this is a useful tool to consider when you're engaging in discussions with organizations that you may be interested to support, but who might not be charitable entities or of the type that you're traditionally used to funding. Because when they're able to articulate how they do what they do, you're able to get a far better sense of where their impact is being felt or the impact that they're seeking to achieve. And I think in this regard, impact then can can be the focus of the conversation more so than purely structure. So that's why we do that, and that's kind of our theory of change. What we learned so if I just go back, that's titled What We Used to Think Would Create the Most Impact. Now, not to say we've deviated from our theory of change, but what we have done is realized, a lot of this kind of work where we're building capability of Māori organizations, that's grant funded. There's no sustainability in that model. And not only that, a lot of the organizations we were working with, they are also grant funded. And so there was not this kind of inevitable sustainability at the end of it. And so what we were finding is that we were, tech is coming. Yeah. That we were strengthening their organizations, we were strengthening their governance, we were strengthening their strategy, we were helping them get really great succession planning in place, all great things. All the outcomes we were actually being sought to achieve by our philanthropic funders, and yet the organizations didn't have financially sustainable models, and neither did we. And so actually, all of that work kind of is for nothing when there's no sustainability beyond the very funding that's enabling it to happen. So what we realized in there is that, okay, cool, just because we as an organization, as a social enterprise, are delivering really great impact in terms of the quality of our training, and it was evaluated by government and won a number of awards, it was bloody good training, but that didn't inevitably lead to sustainability. So we're like, okay, these are two totally different things, delivering social impact and creating sustainability. Now, we should have known that earlier. We did know that earlier, but of course, when you're in a certain model, you either continue to perpetuate and grow inside that model, or you have to literally evolve out of it, and that's very hard to do because all the energy is currently focused on delivering the impact, and you've got to have a separate team or a whole lot of other resources focused on suddenly building your sustainability model. So that's the journey that we went on. And just to give you a sense of it, like we were growing, we were doubling every year. Year on year, we were doubling. And so that sounds great as well. Oh, cool, this organization's growing. Well, when we looked at the sources of our income, what we found is proportionately there was no change. So 30% of our model was still based off government funding. 30% of our model was still based off philanthropic funding, and 30% was kind of coming from other sources and sort of small consulting gigs on the side. So what that meant is actually over time our demand for more philanthropic and government funding was just growing and growing and growing. So we were becoming no more sustainable in proportion of our revenue streams, even though it looked like a great story because our organization was doubling every year. So we went, you know what? That's a dumb model. We need to evolve. So we evolved. And so now we have 2 organizations in our structure. Te Whare Huka Huka is there to build the capability of Māori organizations. And our second organization called Nuku is another social enterprise, which is the moneymaker. And this one sells products into the US market via e-commerce to generate revenue. And that revenue then sustains our team, a team bigger than just as required in Nuku to also work with Māori organizations to build capability. But in fact, it goes a level deeper than that in terms of the interrelationship between the two. It's not just that one funds the other. Actually, when Māori organizations are really strong in their foundation, in their strategy, and have primary sector businesses ready to go global, Nuku's the vehicle that's actually helping them validate a product overseas, understand where in the supply chain they can play, build a brand, and take those organizations global as well in terms of selling their products and services. So there's this nice kind of circular flow here whereby Nuku's providing the capital to Te Whare Huka Huka to do that initial setup work. Te Whare Huka Huka is then enabling these Māori organizations to build their foundations to a point at which they're ready to go global, and that hands them back to Nuku to then do all of that commercialization work alongside and in partnership with Māori organizations. So that's just an example for you of how we've evolved our structure from what was really it was really charitable work masquerading as social enterprise, because in fact we didn't have a sustainable business model, to now actually trying to embed a sustainable model at the essence of what we do and yet still deliver the same impact. So it's a little bit about Te Whare Huka Huka. I just wanted to touch on a couple of these things which were some of the mindsets that we came across along our journey. We were lucky to have some fantastic charitable funders. Incredible trust that they placed in us, given that we did not have it. We are not a charitable entity. We haven't set that up in our structure because, like Lou mentioned, it would cost us $25,000 a year and all the complexity with it. We just weren't down for that. And we hold true to the idea, no, we won't. We will demonstrate that we don't need a charitable structure to deliver great social impact, and to do that in a very high trust environment with charitable and philanthropic funders. But these are some of the mindsets that we have come across and have had to navigate through. And they're just to be aware of, because I don't think they need to limit us. They don't even need to really exist, to be honest. So if we just talk through some of those. So the first is around that making profit is a bad thing. Now, hopefully we know that it's not, but we have come across that. The second is that we can only fund charitable entities. Well, that's probably not actually true. Sometimes it might be true based on your trust deed, but trust deeds can be evolved and should be evolved as the changing context presents itself. We had other ones there around social enterprise founders can't hold equity. Again, we don't really agree with that because we like the idea of aligning the aspirations of those that are putting all that energy in, taking no salary for 2 years like we did to make this thing work, as well as the philanthropic funders who want the impact. We've also come across this idea that, well, we'll fund the social aspect of what you do, and then you guys, it's cool that you want to do sustainability, but you go focus on that over there, and you find your own funding for that. Well, that's cool too, but actually it's a lot of work and a lot of money required to build a sustainable model. So there's potential here to also look at not just funding the social impact work that an organization is doing, but directly funding their economic engine activity. And more recently, we've had a few really strong relationships with big philanthropics in New Zealand who have funded us specifically to set up Nuku and get that organization humming, because they realize, wow, if these guys become sustainable, we can wave goodbye to them and they never have to come back. So they've given us what they term exit grants, which have been very generous. Unfortunate though, I think, because it's one sustainability grant may not be enough. The process of setting up a new business, particularly one that's going to carry a whole lot of operations for another organisation like in our model, that's a lot of capital required, and it may be required over a number of times. And even just setting up a standard startup, or a startup might cost a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash flow or in capital. And so there's potential there to consider, how do we not just give one sustainability grant, but let's do that several times upon achievement of milestones or upon seeing progress of them developing their sustainability model. And then some of these other things were kind of more as we were sort of talking the business lingo, hey, we need to outsource certain expertise over here to be cost effective, and we're using business jargon and things, and people didn't really like that. And then also reporting templates. Oh my gosh, those things are just the bane of my existence. So what we've loved is to see a number of our supporting funders have adopted this concept of having roundtable reporting and a far more high trust environment of reporting than just having to write like a 5-page thing with an account of all the expenses and stuff. That stuff really, I don't think, adds any value to anybody, because what it doesn't do is focus on the learning. It doesn't focus on what are the key things that you've been innovating, testing, and what's the learning that's come from that, and how are you going to then take that learning and build from that and progress. So that's a little bit about the journey at Te Whare Huka Huka, and I think it helps give us a bit of a sense of social enterprise, the journey from kind of charity into social enterprise, as well as how we might reframe our thinking from purely funding structure to actually funding impact when we buy into the particular theory of change that an organisation has. Kia ora tātou.
Cool. So at the heart of all of this is the term impact. And impact can mean a hell of a lot of things to a lot of different people. So what we really wanted to do, this is Penny, she's from Aitken as well, we just wanted to do a bit of an exercise to give you an insight into what good social enterprises are all about. Oh, yeah. Are there any questions before we get into the exercise? Great, they're back there. Do you want to yell out? Yeah.
So I was just wondering, with the legal structure of the social enterprise area, is there ever going to be a time when you don't have to maintain a 35,000 charitable status sort of scenario, but there could be some sort of tax break for proving that you are a social enterprise, or if you can prove that you are creating an impact in a sort of, instead of having to maintain a charitable status, which I know is
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think the key thing that we've learned in our journey of doing this research is, a charitable status is a great thing if it's right for your business. If you're a charity and you trade, and you want that tax benefit, then great, be a charity. Understand what that means to you, that you can't take on equity. Understand that you might have to, invest that money every year in doing your returns and ensuring your fiscal requirements are met. And that suits a lot of organisations. And you only have to look at the charities' reports every year to see the amount of trading that happens within our charitable sector, and that's fantastic. So we're not saying that we don't think that's right. We're saying that that's not right for everybody. So what we want on the other side is that if you want, exactly what Shay was talking about, to be a limited liability company that's recognised as impactful, we want that to be seen and visible within the Companies Act. So yes, there may be, we haven't yet worked with government to the level to say, is there a tax benefit of that? We see probably more likely there being a tax benefit for the investors in that, not necessarily the organisation who is the one trading, because if you want a tax benefit, become a charity. So we've got to work through all of that, and we're really excited about having those conversations and engaging with Business New Zealand and Sustainable Business Council and everyone, certainly the philanthropic sector as well. So yeah, it's a lot of work to go through over the next couple of months, absolutely. Shay, what's the advice you give to a young entrepreneur who's looking down the barrel of 2 years with no income?
Yeah, it's a very real thing, particularly if you've got a young family, right? So how do we motivate a generation of young people who do care about making social change to do that in a way where they're not going to adversely affect their own futures? That's an interesting question, because we run a training program. We've had 130 young Māori come through it, and it's around governance and strategy and social enterprise. We teach them that stuff. And they've set up a number of social enterprises, and a lot of them, they're not making money, like they're not making a wage off this. They're actually just doing it out of the goodness of their heart, with the hope, I guess, that they will find a business model, but it's bloody hard to do that. So I kind of like feel a little guilty for them that we have painted this glorious picture for them about how they can go and do purpose-driven work and make a great impact in their community and set up and they wouldn't really want charitable. Some of them have charitable trusts, but there's a lot of complexity with that. So they've kind of set up basic entities. And if they're not generating a revenue from the very work that they're doing, giving all their soul to, then that can be a little soul-crushing for them. So how do we motivate? Look, I don't see the issue with social entrepreneurs having equity in the venture that they're working on if they have very clear ways of demonstrating the impact that they make. And one of those ways in our case is we've had to demonstrate that every year if we turn a profit, that profit is completely reinvested back into doing social good. So we're still paid. We're paid for the work that we do. We draw a wage, we draw a salary. We also have the equity, but no profit is distributed to shareholders. And I think that that's a happy balance, because actually a lot of the work that we're doing in these kind of businesses, you're not actually building a high value thing that you can exit in 5 years for a massive EBIT multiplier, which usually that's what you're working on in a startup. So there's not a hell of a lot of value in the equity itself anyway. You'd get it through the profit generated if you be wanting to take value out. But when we reinvest that, then of course it reflects the aspirations that we have in the intention to be impactful. So that's probably kind of how I think the happy medium might come.
Cool. Any more questions before we go into the small exercise that we could do over the next 20 minutes or so? Cool. Okay. Well, I'll pass over to Penny. Penny's just going to talk about what is impact, and then I'll hop up and introduce 3 social enterprises, and then get you kind of thinking about what we do every day, which is what Shay talked about, the theory of change. So pass over to Penny.
Kia ora, whānau. So as these guys have talked about, it all comes back to impact. What change we can have. How do I skip this?
Where is
The clicker?
Oh, it's up the top there.
Where? Yeah. So impact is the change. It's not what we're doing, it's what's actually happening at the end of those activities. How do we figure out if we're having impact? So as Shay spoke to before, we use something called a theory of change. So this is a framework that we can use to work through our problem, our activities, and what outcomes and impact those activities are essentially leading to. So this is, what change will happen because of your activity. So it's really drilling down into that. So this is a framework you can use to guide you through that process. And it involves a lot of logic, so linking this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and that's the final impact. And you might find in the course of doing using a theory of change that you discover some unintended or negative outcomes or impact, and that's a really important part of that process. So here is a really simple model of a theory of change. First of all, you identify the key problem or issue. What's the problem you're trying to solve? Then you look at the activity that you're doing to try and solve that problem. And then you look at the output of that activity. So the output is the thing. So if you had a problem where there were children with eyesight problems, you would be like, the output there would be, the activity would be, let's provide them with glasses. The output would be, now they all have glasses. And then the outcome is they can see better And then the impact of that might be that they start getting better reading outcomes, engaging more with their peers, if they can have more eye connection, that kind of thing. So it's that process that you go through. So you're making really logical links at each stage of the process between those things happening. You'll see on the desks that on the table, that there's a sheet which has a definition of the different stages. So the activity, the output, the outcomes, and the impact. Can be a little bit tricky to get your head around that stuff sometimes. So here's a really simple example. So the thing that the company does, so building and selling low pollution cook stoves, so that's the activity. The output of that is that all households then have low pollution cook stoves in their houses. The outcome is that the air pollution inside decreases. And so ultimately the impact of this activity, going through that logical, stepping through that logical process, that's the impact, is that people are healthier. So it's a really simple process there. It can obviously get a lot more complex than that. Here's a slightly more complicated one where you've got two different stakeholders involved. So your problem is that you have people who are experiencing homelessness not being able to find jobs. So the activity that you engage in is running a work readiness program with people who are experiencing homelessness and businesses. So your two key stakeholders are your people experiencing homelessness and your employers. The output of running that program is that those people experiencing homelessness will start to gain employment skills, and also it will connect employers with those people. And in the short term, the outcomes will be that the participants get job interviews, and through that you'll start to see things that like they have increased self-confidence. Eventually, hopefully you'll start to see them get jobs, and then that leads on to other things like better mental and physical health, and kind of more zoomed out outcomes such as costing the welfare system less money. And so then you get to your final impact, which is people experiencing homelessness have greater opportunities to learn and join the workforce and live stable, healthy lives. So you can kind of see it's just logic there. Throughout those stages of the process, you need to make those links. And the way you make those links will be often based on things that you already know, so maybe evidence you have about the activities that you've been engaging in. You can look to other people's research. Will this lead to that? So here's a really simple example of parents will read to their children more, and that will increase cognitive development. So you're going to find research around that. You'll be able to, if you were a parent doing that, you'd be able to observe your child, seeing those outcomes. So it's just, taking that logical approach. Cool, I'll hand back to Luna.
So I found it hilarious this week when the Provincial Growth Fund said they don't know how to measure impact. It's like, you're talking to the wrong people. So, you can make this extremely complicated, and I think where we've got to, and particularly in the social enterprise and the impact space, is academia has made it really, really complicated. Actually, you can pare it right back. And the work that we do is with small social enterprises on this journey, but we also work on the big end of town. So we're doing a piece of work at the moment to look at Air New Zealand's impact model. So it's quite complicated, but actually, if you go through a logical step, you can start understanding what's the long-term impact that they're hoping to achieve, and how do they know whether they're on the journey to do that. So that's the type of work that I think is really important if we are going to transform this economy and put impact at the heart of it. So what we've got here is we've got 3 examples. You've each got them on your table. We're using one which is in the Pacific, extraordinary organisation that we've had the joy to work with over this last year, called Sky Eye Pacific. They do really cool stuff with really, really amazing technology, loads of drones. They do things like in the time of a natural event, a weather event, they were able to send the drones up with cameras and heat-seeking technology that went to some outlying islands in Tonga, and were able to identify whether if there was a live animal on the island, was it a human or was it a cow? Clearly, there would be a different response by the international aid responders if it was a cow versus a human. So it was able to quickly get data back to those who are having to make very, very quick decisions about what their action was. So Sky Eye is not only doing this and resulting in good impact, but they're also owned and operated by Pacifica people in their own communities. So that's one example. The next one, who's heard of BBM up in Auckland? So he's got a couple of pretty famous guys in his crew, but this is a guy who runs boot camps basically all over Auckland. I think he's got about 11,000 members at the moment, something like that. And obviously you'd think, yep, go to a boot camp, you probably lose a bit of weight. Well, have a look at their theory of change, or at least try and figure out what the theory of change is. And what we're going to do is we're going to get you to pick one of these three and start going through a theory of change, and then we'll show you what their theory of changes are and see if you, how close you got. But BBM, extraordinary organisation, really transforming lives in Auckland. We just helped them get $500,000 of equity investment. So, it's a sustainable business on the growth. The other one, and we know this is pretty controversial, and that's damn well why we put it up here, Eat My Lunch, for-profit organisation delivering food into schools. In my previous life, I had the absolute honour of running a breakfast program which delivered about 1 million lunches every 2 weeks, 1 million breakfasts into schools every 2 weeks. And what we saw is extraordinary impact by that food. And so Eat My Lunch have just gone through a process of their theory of change. And so we've got some information on your desk about what's the impact of the work that they do and how did they get to where they see the impact that they can have in our schools. So those are the three examples. On your tables, you will see a blank-ish piece of paper with the theory of change arrows at the top. There should be pens, and there was going to be Post-its, but you'll just have to be Post-it free. If you need Post-its, Penny will pass them out. But start looking at, maybe pick one example or even pick a couple and work through what that logic is. Work through that. We talk about the activity that they do and try and get to the impact. Now, the best thing that we say to people when you're doing this, keep on asking why. What happens next? Why does that matter? What happens next? Because if you get to a point that you can't say, and then what, you know you're at impact. If you can say, then something else happens, you've still got to go a bit further. So just start to think about it, and we're moving away from output. It's not widgets we're looking at, it's what happens with the widget. As a result of the widget, then what? So we're here, we can walk around the tables. We've got about 25 minutes left of the session. So if we give that a go for about 15 minutes or so, and then what we can do is come back and we'll show you the actual theory of change of these three organisations. So get to it. Okay, so if everyone maybe can just take 30 seconds or so to kind of finish off where you're at. The one thing I'll say around these theory of changes is they're live documents for these organisations. There's no right answer. You're not going to get a lolly if you match it entirely on the screen. Sorry about that. But also you might see something that the organisation that we went through this journey on to do the theory of change didn't see because they're so far into it. And maybe we didn't ask the right questions and you saw it. So there's no right or wrong answer. But what we thought we'd do is put up your hand if you did Eat My Lunch. Yeah, BBM? Sky Eye? Cool, okay. So what we might do is there's a couple of microphones just being passed out. If you're keen to share, maybe just talk about what you learned from it, or what was one interesting thing you saw from taking an activity through to an impact. And then we'll just put up the slides where we can show where we got to with those organisations. We'll just focus on BBM and Eat My Lunch, and I can show Sky Eye if you want to see it later on. So anyone willing to be brave and go first? Yeah.
Don't know how this works, but you write it and then you get to present it. It's hardly...
Sounds good.
hardly the team. Supposedly my handwriting's like a doctor's. So we were fantastic at getting a list of activities, but then as we went through, we thought, shoot, all right, we better get through the rest of it. So amongst the activities and, the ones we've done is the Eat My Lunch, and we put the issue down as hungry kids have poorer education outcomes. The activities: make lunches, delivery of lunches, procurement of ingredients, the school recruitment and understanding needs, so working with the schools, looking for charity partners to come alongside, the selling to the customers that unlocks their business model, the tracking impact, so ultimately making sure that where we're ending up, we're keeping an eye on that activity. Recruiting and supervising of people to be in the system, the understanding nutrition and product design needs, the marketing and the channels for people to be able to buy the products, and premises, securing the premises and management of premises. The people and planet, so the people that are contributing or impacted, the kids, parents, local suppliers, teachers, consumers, volunteers. Our outputs were healthy lunches for the kids and the consumers, the on-time deliveries, happy suppliers, and financial sustainability. You're allowed to yell and go, that's not an output, but the outcomes, so our short-term outcomes were kids are not hungry, satisfied customers, and reduced truancy. Medium-term outcomes, it's easier on teachers, so better classroom dynamics and better concentrating kids. The longer-term outcomes, better academic achievement overall for the children. Again, less class disruption, and then we went out to impact, and that was overall improved health, which then links to reduced unemployment and better academic outcomes, through better academic outcomes, improved literacy.
So anyone else who did Eat My Lunch, anything in addition that you saw or that you want to share with the group?
So here's a question: can you put something negative in a theory of change?
Of course, you should.
Because one of the things we discussed was the social stigma that's coming out of kids being
Absolutely.
the ones with the obvious "eat my lunch,"
Yep.
and or them saying I don't like the food. But no, we had corporate giving as a short-term outcome. That's sometimes difficult to access, and it's happening quite a lot. Nutritional education, reduce stress, so stuff around mental health, gut health, physical health. Reducing illiteracy, pathways to economic independence and success, healthy lives, greater opportunities to learn, that kind of thing.
Great, excellent. Anything else for the Eat My Lunch? Yeah.
Yes, just that would. Yeah, I spent most of my professional life looking at theories of change and analysing statements of intent from government agencies, who have been involved in theory of change work since about 2001, where we were forced to focus on outcomes and appropriate theories of change. A couple of things. This is really hard stuff to do. Mm-hmm. Despite the fact of all the resources that government's got and some very, very skilled, knowledgeable, capable people thinking about it day and night, especially some of the big agencies, we have not got that good at it. So that's the first thing to say. Mm-hmm. The second is that always be cautious about simple theories of change and intervention logics. We often say when we draw these boxes that the main action in theories of change occurs between the boxes.
Sure.
And it's to do with risks, and it's about the quality of evidence, and it's about all the other people who are involved. And the example here, the Eat My Lunch example, is a really good example of where addressing the needs of people who need to be involved and the extent to which simply providing lunch is a real solution to the problem. Is the problem underachievement of children? Is it the fact they're just simply hungry? And if that's the case, is this the right intervention in the long term? When you're looking at communities for whom housing is the major factor in things going wrong in their lives, that unemployment is a major factor, that shift work is a major factor, that single-parent families is a major factor, that lack of discretionary income is and when I say major factors, what I mean is, from a research point of view, they are significant in the order of 0.7, 0.8. And so accompanying these kind of important activities have to be other interventions.
Absolutely.
To make sure you hang all this together.
Yep.
Not saying giving kids raincoats and shoes or giving them sandwiches or giving them a good breakfast, all of which are important, but sustainability in the long haul is about changing what goes on and making sure those communities are empowered.
I totally agree, and I think that organisations like Aitken are going in and doing this work with organisations like Eat My Lunch is we're often asking those exact questions. Are you at the bottom of the cliff, or are you providing solutions at the top? And if you're at the bottom, recognise that that's where you are, and actually success is that you're no longer required. And so, yes, we talk about this being simple, and for the purpose of an hour and a half, you kind of have to. But we also recognise that it's absolutely vital that we work with organisations that they can start their journey to understand their impact. Because whether it's because of funding scenarios, whether it's because of the market, whether it's because of the situation that we're so overwhelmed by the problems that we have, if we don't understand what is a good intervention, if we don't understand where that sits within the system of the problem, then we're not going to ever move forward. So I absolutely agree with you, and I think that the more people we have talking about this, the better we will become as a society in focusing on this. So thank you for that. So let's just, who did BBM? Oh, you wanted, sorry.
You actually said what I was going to allude to anyway, because I see where you're coming from within our discussion here, and it may be a plaster, but it's a good plaster for now. And if it's a sustainable plaster for now in the immediate future when it's needed, so long as you said, you recognise the bigger problem and where it sits within, that's important.
And so I'm just wary of time. Does anyone who did BBM want to just share their journey through this theory of change? I think there was you guys over there.
Yes, so we did BBM, and I guess talking through this at the risk we might be oversimplifying a little bit, but what we came up with: activities, workout, fitness, boot camp, training the body, training the mind as well. So it's about health awareness. The people on the planet, we had the people, the trainees, the groups that are going through this, as well as the fitness providers and as well as the healthy food providers and that supply chain. The outputs, this is something I struggled with personally, but the difference between the outputs and the outcomes. Outputs was the number of people, the number of, the percentage of BMI, the kilos lost, increased knowledge and skills of the good stuff. Some of our outcomes were happier people, behaviour change, stress relief, more energised people, leading into the long term of intergenerational wellbeing. And then the impact of all this was decreased mental health problems, decrease in obesity, decrease in hospital presentations, increased self-confidence, and I guess a generally healthier community.
Great. And I think back to the point on evidence, it's really important that as you do your theory of change, you actually bring your measurement framework to the front of it and say, well, how am I going to know whether that output, that impact has been achieved? What's the data collection that I need to do? How do I point it to research that's available that demonstrates the long-term impact? And be really clear on that. And sometimes it can be significant scientific research that's required, but often it can also be ask the person a question and go back 6 months later and ask the same question and see the difference. So it's being able to say, well, how do I know that I'm actually doing this stuff? And once I get that evidence, what am I doing with that? What am I learning? How am I proving that's the impact that I had hoped to achieve? And if not, what do I need to do to change it? What's my lesson that I'm taking from that, and how am I communicating that, really importantly. So let's get into the fun stuff. I'll quickly go through, Sky Eye was first, complicated one, but let's move into BBM. So with BBM, what we did, no, this is the first slide, right? With BBM, we brought them into a room and we had a hell of a lot of Post-its. The great thing about doing this work with the entrepreneurs who are so deep in their business, they're so deep in their impact, is they know all the answers. They just often need to be asked the right questions. So you generally do that and you start to try and group this stuff. So loads and loads of impact things like, mum's proud of me. I know that I'm there in a community. All these things that you start to get out of it. And then you just start to grouping stuff and going, okay, well, how do they all start to fit together? What are the things that we can start grouping that kind of show us that connection that sits behind it, and you're just going again and again and again and again and again. And then you're really starting to zoom into the stuff that's really the tangible bits again. And so what we did is we did this about over 3 or 4 days with the BBM team. And we started to see that there was these themes that came through it, really obvious themes. It was about these positive steps that people were making in their lives. It was about the fact that mentally they were so much stronger, and that they were really supporting themselves as whānau, as the groups themselves were actually, they were forming real family connections within the boot camp teams. So then we were like, okay, well, let's start thinking about that at a logic step. What happens first to then what is the outcome? So, okay, let's start doing that. And we went through this. And so then we started to really see that it's not about weight loss, right? We always knew that deep down. It's, weight loss, that's the output. You're losing weight, right? You're feeling better about yourself. Because you're feeling better about yourself, you're moving, you may be making better decisions about what you're doing in relation to drugs and alcohol. Maybe you're thinking about, I could actually apply for that job that I didn't think I was right for. All of those things starting to do it. And what we really saw is that, people who start their BBM journey at the bottom, because they're in a supportive environment, because they develop healthy relationships, supportive relationships, because they're encouraged to think healthy as far as food and exercise, they're then moving into this mental health area. They've got supportive people around them. They've got positive steps that they're taking. And then they're moving into the impact area. They're enjoying life more. There's better work opportunities. The health benefits are really clear. And then you're saying, well, okay, and how are we proving this? What's the data sets that we're collecting from those individuals, maybe things that are happening in their lives? What are the things that we can start to capture to benefit that? So that's BBM. Eat My Lunch, as you saw, there was all the stuff that came back from surveys that we did with the teachers. Some of it was in output language. Here we started to talk about this outcome. What were the things that resulted from the food being given in a school? Improved attendance, clearly. Reduced shame. And that's a really, really huge one, and it comes down to one of those fundamental issues because of the issues maybe that are in the home, because there's maybe issues around housing, there's issues around employment, there's, the families absolutely want their children to go to school, no doubt there, but they felt such shame in the fact that their children weren't going with lunch that they kept them home. So, that was a significant outcome that was seen. Kids are obviously eating healthier. They're learning about food. What does that mean? They take those lessons home. What does that change? It changes what foods may be being brought into the home. It changes the conversation around how food matters to us as a family. Social inclusion. There was, clearly the negative aspects were being, looked at and saying, well, how do we reduce that? And it's certainly something we did during Kickstart Breakfast was you're actually making sure that there's no stigma by getting the lunch. So how does the school manage the distribution of it? Is it something that the kids just pick up a lunchbox as they walk past the, off the bus from school? Is it that the lunch is packed in a brown paper bag so it's not obvious? All of those things are helping reduce that negative impact. So this is where we got to. Now, absolutely, When you think about Eat My Lunch, they went on a significant journey, and a lot of it was because of, they are a very well-known social enterprise. They're in the media a lot. They are under sometimes, significant attack, and for lots of different reasons, whether you agree with their model or not. And so what we wanted to do with them is say, look, you're not solving child poverty, right? Figure out how you're contributing to being a solution in the impact that you can actually make. And where they got to, which is absolutely fantastic, is their impact is improved educational outcomes. That might lead to a whole bunch of different stuff, but that's very difficult to pin back to a lunch. Very difficult to pin back to shoes, a coat, whatever it might be. So don't go there. Because when you're thinking about your impact story, who's the impact story for? In the case of Eat My Lunch, their stakeholders are so wide. Of course it's the kids and their families. Of course it's the teachers in the schools. But it's also the consumers. Who's buying the lunch, the corporate lunch? It's also their investors. So really, we went through a real journey with them, and they were fantastic to really pare it back and say, actually, this is what we can prove. And they're collecting data. They just released an impact report in this, where they're actually saying, we know we're not solving these big, complex problems, but we're at least trying to contribute to the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And the challenge to them and many other social enterprises is, how are you getting to the top of the cliff? What's your job in solving some of these big things when it comes to inequality? All of these things that are actually then pushing the ambulance to the bottom of the cliff. And that's the real big system change that we're hoping to see. So that was Eat My Lunch. So I hope that was enjoyable. I hope it made you think maybe about, and particularly if you're a philanthropic donor, what is your theory of change? What's the impact that you're hoping to achieve? One example that I use quite a lot when I talk about the power of this stuff is, we've got lots of government funds out there, and one is called 1 billion trees. 1 billion trees is a whole bunch of widgets. It's a whole bunch of outputs. A tree is just an output. What's the impact that we want from that tree? And let's really start talking about that, because if, as a philanthropic donor or wherever you are in the system, if you're able to articulate the impact that you're trying to achieve and enable organisations who deliver that impact to be connected and partnered with you, you may unlock a hell of a lot of innovation. Because in the 1 billion trees example, the output may be delivered not by a tree, it could be seaweed, it could be anything else. So actually, what we want is really a focus in our economy around impact, and then being able to articulate backwards to the activities and the interventions and the problems that we're trying to solve. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you've learned a little bit about what we do, Shay, Christina, and myself, about trying this on this bold action to transform our economy, and we really are grateful to be able to have shared it with you today. So tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.